Good afternoon, and welcome to this special live stream event announcement for an opportunity from the Journal, the Civic Issues magazine, published by the Kansas Leadership Center. The cover story of the summer edition of the Journal is different than anything I've ever been a part of before. It comes about because of the discussions of a diverse group of 10 Kansans who gathered to discuss the topics of immigration and demographic change with us, and it started late last year. And they all came to the topic from different perspectives. About half of them had voted for President Biden in the 2020 election. About half of them had voted for President Trump. And, they were selected from a group of about 120 applicants, and they came from all over the state. But what was really cool is as they talked, and I didn't, know what would happen, but as they worked to sort of like complicate the narrative on these two very polarizing topics, they really found a lot of surprising areas of common ground. And so we have two of those thought partners joining with us today to talk about their efforts in the conversations and to invite more of you to join the conversation. And one of the purposes of this call is to invite you all to join us on August 17th for a kickoff event. And you'll be able to connect with partners like Josie Hammer and Dave Sotelo, who are the ones joining us today. And you'll hear from content experts, and you'll be able to stretch your muscle for complicating the narrative and discussing like these topics in healthy ways that aren't what we usually see in the national headlines or in political party talking points. And so the event series is called Journal Talks, Bringing Together Our Changing Communities. The kickoff event is Thursday, August 17th, and it runs from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Central Time at the Kansas Leadership Center here at 325 East Douglas here in Wichita. And this is one conversation, and we hope like many of you will come to this conversation. But we want to make sure that you don't get the chance, you don't miss the chance to be a part of the conversation because you just can't make it to Wichita. We want this to be a statewide conversation. So we're partnering with groups across the state, especially community leadership programs, to host conversations all across Kansas, in your town and your city, about the issues of immigration and demographic change. And so this all started because people like Dave from Hutchinson and Josie from Cortland decided to get together and start talking about this issue. And so I'm delighted to have you both here with me today. You're special guests to have because you actually got a chance to spend almost 2 hours talking about immigration together and really one-on-one, and it was like a really amazing conversation. So I wanted to just to give our audience a little bit of background about this thought partner process. I was hoping each of you would share a little bit about what made you want to be a part of this. All told, you spent 6 hours with us discussing this issue and got into really deep and intimate conversations about your views and values. What made you want to join, and how did the experience play out for you?
You want to go first, Dave, or would you like me to start?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for having me today, Chris. So I decided that I wanted to be involved in this. I felt like I really wanted to hear from other people, their personal experiences on this, and not just about immigration, but also their experiences about where they live in Kansas and how that's affected, their thought process with immigration. I also felt like possibly females in rural aren't always very loud with their opinions, and they don't come to the table a lot. And so I was really hoping that I could kind of help provide that perspective into this group, and maybe why a lot of us rural females think or feel the way we do. So.
Yeah, for me, I also wanted my perspective at the table. As an immigrant and son of immigrants, I think it's important for us to have a voice in the immigration conversation across our country. And I also like to think about the issue, and I like to think that I have the best ideas of how to move forward. But I also really buy into the KLC concept of what's my part of the mess. And sometimes I think my part of the mess is my lack of desire to partner with uh, imperfect allies, folks who might have some interest in the area, but they don't uh, completely align with my views, and so therefore they can't be my partners in the process. Where in reality, we know that coalitions of change aren't really quite like that.
Oh yeah, so that's really interesting. So, and it's like interesting how like they're related, your answers, but they're very different. Like Dave, like some of it was about bringing your view, and some of it was about challenging yourself. Uh, and Josie, some of yours was about being seen and about like sending this message about people who aren't as seen and like making their views more visible.
Yeah, I think
So
that's 100% right, Chris.
yeah, yeah. So, and actually, like, this is really very meta because, like, we practice this skill called looping as part of our conversations. And I didn't really intend to demonstrate it, but like, one of the things you all did together was you were in a conversation and you practiced reflecting back what you heard from people in conversation, which is a way to drive conversations deeper. It's a way to get past polarization. It's a way to actually, like, know that someone's actually listening to you and not just like, waiting to say the thing that they're saying. I'm curious, like, from your perspective, like, I'm sure you had some expectations going into the experience. Was it what you expected? And what do you think you'll remember most about being a part of these conversations with these thought partners?
You can go first this time, Dave.
Okay, fine. I think for me, it was it was that being heard. Um, And it was so interesting just to experience that, and also challenge myself to listen to, in this case, Joseph's story and her perspective without trying to uh, find a good counter argument or a hole in her perspective. What are you missing, right? That was not my job. My job was to listen. And so that mutual experience of trying to be a good listener and then really being heard about my perspective, that was really cool. It's something that I don't get often. So what I was expecting is just a challenging, heated conversation, and what I got out was being heard and gaining new perspective. Right? I usually approach this with like, "No, you're wrong. Let me try to convince you why I'm right." And in this case, it was not that. And it just changed my perspective on how to approach a conversation uh, as I move forward.
I would agree. I felt like, you know, well, the funny thing was, Dave has a very um, a very deep backstory to why he believes the way he believes with immigration, and he let me go first on this conversation, which was a little tricky, but it was great. And I think that that plays into what you were saying, Dave, though. You came into it being very open and honest and ready to listen. And I really appreciated that you let me speak and explain my perspective to you and my background and why I feel and think the way I do. And then he looped it very well back to me, and I felt very heard, and I think the biggest thing was the feeling of trustworthiness and being safe in these conversations. I felt like right away when Dave and I started to speak, even though we do have these very different backgrounds and stories of why we're connected to this conversation, I never felt that he was going to, either misinterpret or come at me just because I, grew up where I did or any of these things. And I came away with that with such respect for Dave, not only for everything that he brought to the table, but just how he reacted to me. I greatly appreciated. So I would say that's the biggest thing was respecting. I felt this mutual respect we both came away with, even though we are, quite different. But I would love to always speak with Dave again. I feel like we could have great conversations from this point on because we've created that trust already in our
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, and Jose, I think one of the things that just I remember there was like this great energy in our conversation because in a way we both talked about like for me it was my spirituality and just maybe my philosophy of life is all about like we're all connected. There's something bigger than us that connects us, whether that's just humanity or a higher being, and that was a big part of our conversation of this sacredness of connection that you and I had, but it also just made me feel more connected to Kansas and a Kansas that maybe doesn't look quite like me, but it is my home.
Yeah.
Yes,
What?
and I
Go
and I
ahead.
agree. Sorry, Chris. Oh, I agree with Dave on that. Like, I don't know. I came definitely away with definitely a stronger pride already in my state, my home state, where I've been born and raised, and where Dave lives now. And I feel like that was. I hope that this is something we can continue with other people, because you feel such a grab to your state now, that this is something we did in Kansas and we can do it. We can have this conversation, and I don't know that every state feels that they can do that, but I feel like we're starting this. And Dave and I both hope that this is something we can spread out to everybody in the state, and everybody can say, this is my state. We did it. We can talk.
Yeah, and that's kind of brings me to my next question. Like, so one of the things that's like I didn't know what would happen when we brought this group together. Like, I knew like if we gave the work back to you, you would help us figure out like where this was going to go and what we would learn and what the right things were. And I didn't know that like an event series and a shared like essay, editorial type thing that doesn't really represent the view of any one person or organization, but kind of like our collective like memo to Kansas to inspire people to talk different. Like I didn't know any of that would happen, but it was like fascinating to be there and watch this like this little micro environment where people are allowed to connect in different ways that I assume doesn't happen as much as it should outside in the real world. And so now we are actually going to try and like create the experience that you all had connecting with people and talking deeply about this issue and scale it up and expand it to more people and give more people that opportunity. And I'm curious, like based on your experience, um, like like how are you hoping this group contributes to healthier conversations about immigration and demographic change? Like what do you hope happens from here on out, and what do you want people to learn from you?
I'm really hoping that there's kind of twofold here. I guess I'm really hoping that each of us can go out and if we can come to a conversation and invite somebody else to talk to us, that they learn from that it's okay for them to go and speak to other people. But the secondary part is, one thing about this group is we knew we were able to speak in a safe environment, and that everybody that was in this group was coming with the intent of learning more. So I guess I hope that's something that we can spread out, that we need people to understand that, okay, this is a conversation. And if you're going to go into it, you need to be willing to listen and learn and not just speak. You need to be willing to go into it with that open mind.
Yeah. I think pessimism is a choice. Apathy is a choice, and there are systems that make it easier to be pessimistic about the future of our communities, about the future of this conversations that we're having around immigration. I certainly more often than not feel uh, pessimistic about just the division and this topic, the lack of understanding, the lack of um, real desire to listen to folks, to listen to their experiences, and to learn about the benefits of immigration, to learn about the real risks of immigration, because there are some. Um, and so I'm hoping that we can help people choose to take action. We can help people choose to be excited about the possibilities, help people choose to be, I don't really like the word positive, but at least see some opportunity for progress. That's what I hope we can become sort of ambassadors for change, because pessimism is a choice. That means there's an alternative to that as well.
I think one of the hardest things for me in like working with this group and trying to like provide frames for the issue is like giving people a sense of agency, like they can actually do something. Because immigration is a federal issue, and elected officials and people who have high degrees of authority have like a lot of power. And there was a lot of frustration in the group about uh, elected officials and people in authority on both sides of the political aisle like not doing enough. And we couldn't have our conversations be just about that, because it's hard to like see an opening for how any of the three of us or any of the 10 of us can like do anything or exercise any leadership, because it just sort of creates this roadblock. And so I think like one of the hope of this conversation is that it like creates new avenues for people to think about what they can do to make their communities more welcoming, accepting, cohesive places to understand each other, to hear from each other more. I'm curious, like your name is in this magazine, like you're on this live stream, it's kind of high profile. When you think about like what happens next, like what's your greatest hope and what's your greatest fear about what might happen, or what what do you worry about? And I worry about things all the time, so maybe I'm projecting, but yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I mean, that's got to be an experience. I'm used to having my name in the news all the time, and this might be just a little newer for you too.
Yeah, I'm not a stranger to sharing my story. And in fact, I've always been motivated to share my experience because I often get to talk to folks who maybe don't quite agree, or say, well, I have all these thoughts about immigration. And then I get to share my story, and I usually hear, well, okay, maybe there's a starting point. Maybe there's some room for understanding that a little bit deeper, or I've never heard something like that before. And so I always make an effort. But I think my fear, I'm like you, Chris. I worried about everything. I'm always worried about everything all the time. And my worry is that we shy away from talking about the risks. Like we have to be honest that people are afraid about their sense of identity in their communities, about their sense of identity of who gets to belong. And when we don't talk about that loss, there's a lot of pain. And so I'm a little afraid that we shy away from that conversation because it's necessary. I'm terrified about, the future of these conversations if we don't pay attention to people's sense of loss when a change of identity is happening in our Kansas communities. So I'm really worried about that, but I'm also excited that we get to talk about it and that we can be brave when we enter these spaces. I'm excited to hopefully see a lot of folks across the state be agents of change and help people have real and tough conversations around immigration.
I would have to say I'm not somebody that I don't like to ruffle a lot of feathers normally. Like I said at the beginning, kind of being in that somewhat quiet group of people. But I also, I'd be sad if I didn't speak up at some point and get involved so that changes can happen. I guess one of my biggest fears about the group is that we don't use what we learned and it becomes apathetic again. Like Dave was saying, is that we don't hone in on what made this successful and be able to replicate it. Because I feel like if we can't get people to have these conversations in an open and honest way, and also try to listen to someone who doesn't believe necessarily the way you believe, then we're not going to progress at all in our communities or as a state. So that's a concern. Also, yeah, when you start talking about political views and things out there openly, it's concerning. You get a little nervous about people's perceptions of you and stuff. I think that's one of the reasons this group was so cool, was that we all knew that not necessarily exactly what each person believed politically, but we all knew that we probably didn't believe the same way. And so we went into that conversation knowing that. And so I want people to understand that they can have that conversation safely with people that don't believe what they believe. But, it can move forward that way together still.
Well, I'm looking forward to sort of the next chapter on August 17th. We'll have journal talks, bringing together our changing communities, the kickoff event, 5:30 to 7 p.m. Central Time here at KLC 325 East Douglas in Wichita. So I want to give you two the chance. Any final things you'd like to say before we go? Anything you'd like to leave our audience with, or you can just say goodbye.
I just want to say, let's be courageous around this. Let's be brave and embrace the conversation, even though it's difficult. And curiosity is a superpower in this space, because if we're curious about experiences, about perspectives, I think we can make some progress.
Dave kind of stole my words. I was going to say very close to that. One of the reasons I initially got involved was because I feel like there's so much misinformation out there on both sides of the issue. And I truly believe that we find the truth when it comes to personal experiences. So that's why it was so amazing to me that Dave and I could have the conversation we did and actually talk about our personal experiences, because I feel like that's the only place you're going to get all that honesty and be able to make decisions on what your perspective is going to be. And so I feel like, that's something else that I want people to learn to do, is to be open to sharing those personal experiences. Not everybody is going to respond the way you want them to, but you can have these amazing, surprising conversations like Dave and I did, where we were being honest about things. And so I would say just, those personal experiences for the honest answers to be able to move forward on things, to understand why people believe the way they believe.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. Thank you for all your efforts to get us to this point and being a part of the group. And we'll look forward to the next chapter of this conversation starting on the 17th. And hopefully will be the start of the kinds of conversations that you talk about happening more often in Kansas and beyond. And excited to be a part of it with you. And until then.
Thank you, Chris.